Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. I am Muhammad Solihin bin Zaizi. First, I would to explain about specification table. Affiliation School of Social and Economic Development, Mesti Malaysia Terengganu. Title of our assignment is Type of Exchange Rate System and Malaysian Monetary History. Subject area Economics. More specific subject area International Exchange Rate and Monetary Policy. Type of data Exchange Rate and Interest Rate. How data was acquired. Retrieved from World Development Indicator WDI, World Bank. Data format raw, semi-analysis and analyze. Experiment factor, data filtering, experimental future, exchange rate and interest rate data was extracted from the WDI database. The data was then analyzed with band-pass filtering method to produce trade openness volatility. Data source location. The data was retrieved from the World Development Indicator WDI, World Bank on March 2022. Data accessibility. Raw data can be retrieved through the World Development Indicator WDI, World Bank. The converted data are open requests.
Country with consistent inflation rate developed a rising currency as its purchasing power increased against other currencies. Countries with highest inflation usually see deep depreciation in their currency, followed by high interest rate. Interest rate, inflation, and exchange rate are closely related. By manipulated interest rate, the central bank has an influence over bond inflation and the exchange rate exchange interest rate as a result of inflation and the value of the currency. High interest rate offer borrowing in highest economy compared to other countries. Highest interest rate attracts foreign capital and cause exchange rate to rise. The current account is the balance of trade between country and its trading partner, then reflect all payment between country of goods, service, interest rate, and dividend. Show a country spend more of foreign trade their income, and it borrow capital from foreign source to form a deficit. A country need more foreign currency, then it uses to export, sell, and supply more on currency than foreigner demand for in product. Country with as positive characteristic will attract investment fund for other country. Malaysia interest rate remained standing in the early 1917 until 1918. When it entered the 1918, Malaysia suffered with commodity shock in 1985 and 1986, and it marked the highest rate 20.96% until today. The 1985 and 1986 economic crisis was triggered by the highest interest in the US, which is better known as the Volcker shock. Paul Volcker was the newly appointed US Federal Reserve Chairman, and in 1918 to remain in rising price. He introduced record high interest rate, which led to a collapse in world commodity trade. The government had to embark on an austerity drive as a result of the ballooning debt for the heavy interest program. Malaysia fell into a recession in 1985 with a gross domestic product (GDP) contracting 1% that year. The non-performing loan (NPL) ratio of commercial bank hit a highest of 30% in 1997 and 1998. Malaysia interest rate maintained the pace from the 1990 until coming to the recession in 1997, Asia financial crisis in 1997 and 1998, that is deemed as one of the worst economic crises Malaysia has ever faced. Its main cause, according to academics, was the wholesale adoption of financial regulation in bond capital account and the banking sector. The financial impact still exists until 1999, when it's recording the highest rate in 19 years, with 8.510. Malaysia interest rate again recording a standing movement from 20 and 27, the standing rate will last long until the world has been shocked by global financial crisis of 28 and 29. The global financial crisis of 28-29 then trusted in the US were caused by a crisis led by banks, especially housing loan. For Malaysia, the country suffered the impact in terms of financial and trade channels. Malaysia, a trade-dependent country, was severely hit in trade and investment. Thus, the interest rate recorded in 29, which was 11.79%, is the highest within the decade. After 2010, Malaysia interest rate is a satisfactory point when it maintains the pattern.
Assalamualaikum and hi, I will introduce the material of exchange rate. The first is we have the purchasing power parity theory. Purchasing power parity theory is a theory which states the exchange rate between currencies are in equilibrium when their purchasing power is the same in each of the two countries. This means that the exchange rate between two countries should equal the ratio of the two countries' price level of a fixed basket of goods and services. When a country's domestic price level is increasing, which means a country experiences inflation, that country's exchange rate must depreciate in order to return to purchasing power parity. Number 2 is interest rate parity theory. The interest rate parity theory is a concept concerning the connection among the spot alternate price and the anticipated spot price or ahead alternate price of currencies, primarily based totally on interest rate. The concept holds that the ahead alternate price must be identical to the spot currency trading price instance, the interest rate of the host country divided via way of means of the interest rate of the overseas country. Interest rate parity theory comes handy in analyzing the connection between the spot rate and relevant forward future rate of currencies. In step with this theory, there will be no arbitrage in rate of interest, completely differential between two different currency, and also the differential are mirrored within the discount or premium for the forward rate on the foreign exchange. The idea also stresses on the actual fact that the dimensions of the forward premium or discount on a remote currency is capable the distinction between the spot and forward interest rate of the currency in comparison.
There are three ways to measure the exchange rate. First is bilateral exchange rate. The most common method to measure is by using the bilateral exchange rate. Bilateral exchange rates are the value of one currency to another. Bilateral exchange rates are usually estimated against the world's most traded currency, which is the US dollar. Bilateral exchange rates are visible in our daily lives and are widely reported in the media. Secondly is cross rate. Bilateral exchange rates are also the basis for calculating cost rate. Cross rate is an exchange rate calculated relative to a third currency. For example, if you know the exchange rate from the euro to the US dollar and the exchange rate from the Australian dollar to the US dollar, the exchange rate between the euro and the Australian dollar is AUD over US dollar and euro over US dollar. Thirdly is trade weighted index. While bilateral exchange rates are the most commonly cited exchange rate, the trade weighted index provides a broader measures of the overall trend of currency. This is because this measurement gets the price of the domestic currency as a weighted average of a group or basket of currency. The weight of each currency in the basket is usually based on the percentage of the country trades with each trading partner.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Samsul Bahdin, S55326. Today I will talk about the free floating. A free floating means is the free floating current system is the predominant system of foreign exchange in the prevalent in the world today. As the globalization has approached, more countries has abandoned their current pitch and has allowed their currency to feel floating. Some has been forced to do by a market participant where they have made their choice in the light of the advantage that his system has offered. Free floating has advantage and disadvantage. Advantage free floating, number one is market determined rate. Free floating exchange rate means that the market will determine the rate at one of a current can be exchanged for another. Number two is independent. Free floating exchange rate allow their government and central bank of a nation to have a great degree of independence. Number three is a less probability of speculate attack. Free floating current face adjustment or 1 minute to a 1 minute basics. Number four is low requirement of reserve risk. A free floating exchange system does not require the central bank to hold a massive reserve. Last but not least is the disadvantage. Number one is uncertainty. A free floating current rate implying of a lot of volatility. The value of the currency change of the real time base. Number two is lack of discipline. A free floating exchange rate only makes sense in the country has suffers internal control mechanized in the place. Thank you.
A fixed exchange rate is a policy that imposes a uniform rate between two currencies, usually determined by a government or central bank. A fixed exchange rate system is designed to keep a currency value with a specific range. Fixed rate provide greater certainty for exporters and importers and help the government maintain low inflation. Fixed rates also help keep interest rates down, which stimulates trade and investment. Floating exchange rates are the most common type of exchange rate system. The going rate on the foreign exchange rate market sets the price of a currency. Today, most fixed exchange rates are pegged to the US dollar. Countries also peg their currencies to the currencies of their most frequent trading partner. For example, if 1 unit of local currency is determined to be worth $3, the central bank needs to make sure that those dollars can be supplied to the market. To maintain the cost, central bank must have a high level of foreign exchange reserve. These are the advantage and the disadvantage of the fixed exchange rate. The advantage is providing greater certainty for importers and exporters, therefore encouraging more international trade and investment. Second is helping government maintain low inflation, which can have positive long-term effects such as keeping down interest rates. The disadvantages is preventing adjustment for currency that become under or overvalued, limiting the extent to which central banks can adjust interest rate for economic growth, requiring a large pool of reserve to support the currency if it comes under pressure. During Asian currency crisis in September 1998, the Malaysian government implement an important policy. On 1st September, BNM has introduced several steps to improve capital control. The following day, on 2nd September, there was a fixed exchange rate system introduced of RM over 3.8 US dollar. Tun Dr. Mahathir dismissed Anwar Ibrahim from the post of Minister of Finance and Deputy Minister Prime Minister for different policy to deal with the currency crisis. On 3rd September, the reserve requirement ratio was reduced from 6% to 4%, from 9.5% to 8%. by regulating capital outflow and fixing the ringgit exchange rate. BNM has implemented monetary easing to create space for autonomous monetary policy and help domestic economy recover from the recession. On 15 September 1999, short-term capital outflow restriction mentioned above. It has been switched to a step-by-step transfer tax procedure. Gradual withdrawal from capital regulation. It is considered desirable to avoid a large capital outflow on 1 September 1999. Then all short-term capital that flow in before the introduction of capital regulation was exempted from speed restriction on 1 September 1998. The transfer tax has also changed uniformly. It was 10% on September 21st, 1999 and was finally abolished on 2nd May 2001. On July 21, 2005, the Chinese government announced that it had moved the yuan exchange rate to a managed float system, with the yuan rising slightly against the US dollar. Shortly thereafter, BNM also announced a switch to a managed floating system. The managed floating system introduced by Malaysia fixed the ringgit against a basket currency weighted by major trading partners, effectively returning to the exchange rate system before the introduction of the fixed exchange rate system in 1998. As a result, neither the ringgit nor the yuan have changed significantly, and it can be said that they have succeeded in breaking away from the fixed exchange rate system.
Next is patch exchange rate. A patch exchange rate is a kind of monetary policy in which one country's government fixes a certain exchange rate for its currency in relation to another country's currency or to a group of currencies. The value of an exchange rate between nations may be maintained via the use of a patch currency. When this is done, the exchange rate that are used for business planning are more predictable over the long run. The principal objective of currency pairs is to facilitate more international commerce by lessening the impact of fluctuation in the value of foreign currency. Because the profit margins of many companies are so tiny, even a little fluctuation in exchange rate may completely wipe out earnings and push them to seek for new suppliers. It is standard practice for countries to create a currency pair with an economy that is either stronger or more developed. This allows local enterprise to access larger markets with less exposure to risk. The advantage for patch exchange rate. The first is expand trade and boost real incomes. Number 2, makes long-term investment realistic. Number 3, reduce disruption to supply chains. And the last is minimize changes to the value of investment. And disadvantages for patch exchange rate is affect forex trading by artificially stemming volatility. Number 2, reduce purchasing power when patched too low. Number 3 is create trade deficit when patched too high. And the last is increases inflation when patched too high. Malaysian has patched their currency when Malaysia has maintained a fixed exchange rate for over 5 years now. The practice of purging the currency of one nation that of another fraught with significant danger. The value of the US dollar began to fluctuate significantly during the oil crisis that occurred in 1973. Currently, the rate of inflation in Malaysia reached skirting high which pushing the central bank to take required action to prevent fluctuation of RM, since one of the central bank role is to make monetary policy to safe protect the value of currency. Some people claim that there are no need to peg the currency in order to get through this financial crisis, while others support the move that our previous Prime Minister Tun Dr. Muhammad. The pegging was completed 13 months after the start of the crisis. During the time, Malaysia was one of the countries that was hit hard by the crisis. However, this topic will be covered in more detail in the article that is titled Asian Financial Crisis. Almost the whole time from 1998 to 2005 was spent with Malaysia currency tied to the US dollar. This year, Malaysia ringgit will once again be freely used currency. Despite the fact that it's free, there are still certain costs involved. The ringgit is unrestricted but does not calculate at will. The float is now considered to be managed. Some critics may refer to its dirty float, to their way of thinking a free float in the same thing. That's all, thank you.
I will explain about managed float exchange rate. A managed float exchange rate is an exchange rate system that allows a nation's central bank to intervene regularly and in foreign exchange market to change the direction of the currency's float and or reduce the amount of currency volatility. A managed float exchange rate is also known as a dirty float. Is exchange rate regime in which the exchange rate is neither entirely or not fixed. Rather, the value of the currency is kept in a range against another currency or against of bucket of currencies by central bank intervention. There are several reasons why a central bank intervenes in a currency market that is usually allowed to float. First, market uncertainty. Central banks with a dirty float sometimes intervene to steady the market at time of widespread economic uncertainty. The central banks of both Turkey and Indonesia intervened openly numerous times in 2014 and 2015 to combat currency weakness caused by instability in emerging market worldwide. Some central banks prefer not to publicly acknowledge when they intervene in the currency market. Second, speculative attack. Central banks sometimes intervene to support a currency that is under attack by a hedge fund or other speculator. For example, a central bank may find that the hedge fund is speculating that its currency might depreciate substantially. Thus, the hedge fund is building up speculative short position. Country with a managed floating exchange rate, for example, Brazil, South Korea, Chile, South Africa, and Turkey. Managed floating exchange rate have the following advantage. First, automatic stabilization. Any disequilibrium in the balance of the payment would be automatically corrected by a change in the exchange rate. For example, if a country suffers from the deficit in the balance of payments, then other things being equal, the country currency should depreciate. This would make the country's export cheaper, thus increase demand, while at the same time making imports expensive and decreasing demand. Second, freeing internal policy. Under the floating exchange rate system, the balance of the payment deficit of a country can be rectified by changing the external price of the currency in the country. If a fixed exchange rate policy is adopted, then reducing a deficit could involve a general deflationary policy for the whole economy, resulting in unpleasant consequences such as unemployment and idle capacity. Managed floating exchange rate also have the following disadvantage. First, lack of investment. The uncertainty introduced by floating exchange rate may discourage direct foreign investment. Second, speculation. The day-to-day fluctuation in exchange rate may encourage speculative movement of hot money from country to country, thereby causing more and more in exchange rate fluctuation.
Assalamualaikum and very good morning. My name is Muhammad Aiman Afiq bin Ibrahim. My metric number is S54592. Today I'm going to present about monetary policy in 1960 until 1970. The significant milestones in Malaysian foreign exchange rate. Up to June 1967, currency board as the sole currency issuing authority. Under the currency board system, the exchange rate of the Malaysian dollar was fixed at 2S40. The currency board assumed the role of converting sterling into Malayan dollars and vice versa at a small administrative charge of 1 per 8D. June 1967, Bank Negara Malaysia assumed sole power to issue currency. 12 June 1967, on that day, the bank commenced the issue then new Malaysian dollar. At the same time, arrangements were made for the old Malayan currency issued by the board to be withdrawn and presented to the board for redemption at the rate of 2S40. At the November 1967, appreciation of Malaysian dollars as sterling was devalued by 14.3. The devaluation of the sterling occurred when the old Malayan currency continued to circulate side by side with the new Malaysian currency, as the Malayan dollar was legally fixed to S40 in the currency agreement 1960. Any devaluation of the sterling will automatically devalue the Malayan dollars to the same extent. However, the par value of new Malaysian dollar was valued in terms of gold, and hence the devaluation of sterling means that the new 1 Malaysian dollars can be exchanged at 2S 8.67D instead of 2S4D. On March 1968, the international gold and exchange crisis. The crisis led to the closure of the London gold and foreign exchange market on 15 March 1968. And the suspension of foreign exchange dealing from 15 to 17 March of 1968. October 1968, it changed the method in quoting exchange rates. On October 1968, a new method of quoting exchange rate for the ringgit was introduced for easier understanding by the public and consistent with the international practice. On November 1968, The suspension of foreign exchange trading due to speculation of the Deutsche Mark. Massive speculation in the international foreign exchange market led to the closure of several European foreign exchange markets from 20 to 22 November. On October 1970, cessation of foreign exchange trading on Saturday, commercial bank in Malaysia ceased to transact foreign exchange on Saturday from 17 October, consistent with other countries' practice. This is to reduce the risk of losses for open contract transacted on Saturday, which was exacerbated due to substantial fluctuation on a day-to-day basis due to the recurrent crisis in the exchange market internationally.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Nasruddin bin Muhammad Isa. My number matric is S55128. Today I will continue with the Malaysian monetary history from 1971 until 1980. An important feature that characterizes Malaysian economy is its transformation from an agriculture-based economy to a manufacturing-based economy. The increasing importance of the manufacturing sector is reflected in its increased contribution to total output and the total export. In 1970, the agriculture sector was the most dominant, was its share in total output being 30.6%. Meanwhile, the manufacturing sector contribute only 13.4% total production. The economy's huge reliance on agriculture and major commodities proved detrimental to the economies as it succumbed to the global economic slowdown and trade shock conditions in the 1980s. Substantial flow of note between the state and that consistently larger amount from Singapore to Malaysia. The quarterly repatriation of the Singapore currency from Malaysia comprises a very share of the total amount of the Singapore currency in active circulation. In May 1973, the Malaysian Finance Minister in that year individually gave the 3 months notice that of the end of the automatic transfer to the two of currencies. The decision was accompanied by several other amendments to exchange control to eliminate discrimination in favor of member the sterling earlier. In addition, foreign companies are also required to obtain approval to borrow more than $500,000 from local bank. In addition, Malaysians are required to obtain approval to transfer more than $1,000 abroad.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So I will continue about monetary history in 1981 until 1990. So in 1980, the financial reform or recession, the finance privatization and let the market determine the lending rate and make the coupon rate on government securities more sensitive to market conditions. Monetary policy had 3 goals in 1980s. Monetary policy tools: reserve ratio, minimum liquidity ratio, discount rate or reduce. The Trust of Act in 1949
and Section 68 of the BAFIA 1989 permit commercial bank to hold private debt securities. After allowing commercial bank to set their own lending rate in 1983, Malaysia Central Bank began a wave of financial liberalization across the country. Main dealers in government securities have also been allowed to operate since 1989 by a number of commercial bank, merchant bank, and discount house. After that, there are recent change in the structure of banking. In 1983, in response to the need for interest-free commercial bank option, the Islamic Bank opened its door for business. Because the charging of interest on financial transaction is forbidden by Islamic law, it is of financing that are permitted by Islamic law. The Islamic Banking Act of 1983 provide a legal framework within which Islamic bank in Malaysia are required to operate. Not only the Islamic bank use the same monetary policy instrument as non-Islamic banks, with the exception of interest rate control, but it must also coexist with them. This poses a number of concerns that have a considerable impact on fund management. One of the key concerns is inflexibility of their instrument as a result of interbank market restriction, repurchase agreement transactions, and short-term investments such as money at call. Since its inception 6 years ago, the Islamic Bank has grown significantly. Data about the company deposit, asset, and financing may be found in Table 6. Between 1984 and 1989, deposit grew by a factor of 5. Due to this change, deposit at commercial bank went from being worth 0.5% in 1985 to being worth 1.8% in 1989. Table 6 revealed the commercial bank's asset grew from 557 million or 0.8% of the total asset in 1984. 1.6 million or 1.5% in 1989, from 500 million in 1984 to 695 million in 1989. Private sector financing expanded. So due to lack of usage of profit sharing system, large level of investment and capital formation haven't been achieved. To finance service and personal use, installment purchase, al-bay bitaman ajil have been largely utilized. Islamic Bank haven't utilized the Qadar al-Hasanah beneficial loan for the needy, low-cost housing and small business as much as they should. Fears have been raised concerning the ability to achieve with more equitable distribution income.
In May 1997, the Thai baht got here under excessive pressure from speculator attacks. The ringgit occasionally no longer spared and got here under excessive selling pressure. Bank Negara Malaysia, the Central Bank of Malaysia, on the spot respond become to interfere with inside the foreign exchange market to uphold the fear of the ringgit. Bank negara voluntarily upheld the fee of the ringgit of approximately every week early than it sooner or later become pressured to float the ringgit on July 18. By the time the bank had already lost near US 1.5 billion inside the effort to prop up the ringgit. Its lowest point, the ringgit depreciated toward the dollar to nearly 50 according to Sen, hitting a excess of RM 4.88 to the US dollar on January 7, 1998. After a brief period of balance throughout February and March, the trend continued to become worse and hardened fluctuation inside the following month. Even more drastic than the plunge in the trend fee became the instigate of the inventory marketplace. Between July and December 1997, the composite index of the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange fell to 44.9%. Following a mild recovery in the first semester of 1999, the index almost fell this time to an 12-month low of 262.70 factor on September 1, 1998. Although among July 1, 1997 and September 1, 1998, marketplace capitalization in the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange fell to approximately 76% to RM 181.5 billion. Effect even to enjoying the five financial fundamental amongst international location and have been hit to the crisis. Malaysia killed the biggest inventory marketplace player in the region. The asset bubble nationally soon or later burst, and the crash changed into observer with the end of using language capital of offload as self-belief inside the Malaysian economic system become increasingly shaky. As a result, the banking system start out the experience going now at thin lows. NPL, which in keeping with bank negara data was from approximately a modest 2.18% in June 1997 to 4.08% in December 1997. After which to a deficit of 11.45% in July 1998. Private area estimate of inflation of the time has been looked better than the reputable finger suggestion as many corporations and all start to roll over debt as part of the survival strategy. Meanwhile, the growth in NPL in the banking and economy area change into mandated in political town in borrowing and financing begin approximately like liquidity condition. According National Economic Recovery Plan has four ways. First, foreign exchange rate policy. Malaysia is highly open economy with external trade export and import constantly over 200% of its GDP. As the stability on its currency is crucial of in external trade. Prior to and during the crisis, the ringgit was trend offshore, and the high interest rate paid to offshore ringgit deposit occasioned the outflow of the currency. At the height of the crisis in 1997 and 1998, speculation drove the offshore ringgit interest rate in Singapore to between 20 and 14% a year, compared with 11% offshore ringgit interest rate. Mahathir banned offshore market trending of the ringgit in September 1988 and gave depositors a brief period to reposition their offshore ringgit deposit back to Malaysia. At the same time, he fixed the exchange rate US $1 to RM 3.8 ringgit Malaysia. Second, selective capital control. Mahathir further introduced selective capital control measure that was strongly opposed by the IMF at the time. For foreign institutions and persons, a 1-year moratorium from the purchase day of shares was imposed of reputation of proceeds from the sale of some shares. The aim was to discover circulation short-term trending in location. Ringgit loan to non-resident bank and stockbroking fee when stopped. Restrictions were imposed on transfer of ringgit fund in external account held by non-resident. Measures were also introduced to control conversion of the ringgit to other currency. Except of train payment purpose, Malaysian residents when allowed to make payment to non-resident or make investment of up to the equivalent of M10,000 above which they had to obtain the approval of Bank Negara. Second, expansionary fiscal policy. They circulated the economy. The government embarked on the expansionary fiscal policy. In July 1998, they unveiled a fiscal stimulus package of ringgit Malaysia 2 billion, which turned in the budget from a surplus of 2.5% of GDP in 1997 to a deficit of 1.8% in 1998 and 3.2% in 1994. And lastly, the setting up debt security agency. Finally, on the corporate form, the government established a number of agencies to help restructure both financial and non-financial institutions. We provided quantity of banking deposit and decided not to close down probably financial institutions that would have aggravated the financial crisis, but rather to consolidate restructuring and recapitalization them. To the end, the Big Restructure Agency was set up in July 1998 to take over non-performing loan for bank and to restructure and manage them.
Fiscal policy implemented in 2001 was expansionary to stimulate domestic economic activity. As the external environment became more adverse, the government implemented a series of fiscal stimulus programs in March and again in September 2001. In 2002, monetary policy remained accommodative to support economic recovery. The accommodative monetary and fiscal stance and increasing robustness in economic growth resulted in stronger demand for loans by the private sector. Monetary policy in 2003 would continue remain to accommodative to support economic growth while keeping interest rates low. Monetary policy in 2003 will continue to provide a positive enabling environment for strengthening private consumption and investment. On the exchange rate front, the focus of policy is to ensure that economic fundamentals continue to support the pegged exchange rate as stability in the exchange rate accords a significant advantage in enhancing trade and investment opportunities. While the government continued to pursue gradual fiscal consolidation to strengthen its fiscal position in 2004, the monetary policy stance remained accommodative to support domestic economic activities. The overnight policy rate OPR will therefore remain unchanged at 2.7%. On the exchange rate front, the pegged exchange rate arrangement continues to accord significant benefits to the Malaysian economy by providing predictability and stability for international trade and investment. In 2005, BNM announced the shift to a managed float system. Therefore, monetary policy will continue to play a supportive role in ensuring that the Malaysian economy continues to grow at close to its potential. The OPR will remain unchanged at its current level of 2.7%. Monetary policy implementation throughout 2006 was focused on managing the liquidity situation in implementing the monetary policy decisions and maintaining orderly conditions in the money and foreign exchange market. The OPR was increased from 2.7% in 2005 to 3.5% in 2006. In terms of exchange rate, the ringgit has experienced a greater two-way movement following the transition to a more flexible exchange rate regime. In 2007, Bank Negara Malaysia conducted a monetary operations to stabilize the average overnight interbank rate around the OPR to ensure that there was sufficient liquidity in the interbank market. Its Monetary Policy Committee or MPC decided to leave the OPR unchanged at 3.5%. The trend in the ringgit exchange rate also affected monetary conditions. Strong two-way international trade and investment flows continued to determine the ringgit performance against the major regional currencies in 2007. Monetary policy in 2008 operated in a complex environment with rapidly changing inflation, economic and financial conditions. The liquidity and exchange rate trends reversed in the second half of the year. Throughout the year, the bank's discretionary money market operations continued to maintain liquidity conditions that ensured that the overnight interbank interest rate traded within plus minus 25 basis point corridor around the OPR. The other longer-term interbank rates continued to be primarily market determined, reflecting overall demand and supply condition as well as prevailing interest rate expectation in the financial markets. In 2009, monetary policy was confronted with heightened risk to growth arising from the global economic and financial crisis. Comprehensive policy measures were implemented by Bank Negara and government to cushion the impact of the global recession on the domestic economy. Bank Negara Malaysia front-loaded the interest rate cuts to cushion the economy from rapidly weakening global economy. The bank reduced its OPR by a total of 150 basis points between November 2008 and February 2009 to 2%. Monetary policy in 2010 shifted away from the need to avert a fundamental economic downturn and turned towards balancing the risk to inflation and growth, while ensuring that monetary conditions were appropriate to prevent the build-up of financial imbalance. Bank Negara Malaysia decided to maintain OPR at 2.75%. The MPC considers the current monetary policy as appropriate and consistent with the latest assessment of the economic growth and inflation prospects. To be simplified, in the United States, where the global financial crisis started, massive monetary easing such as a de facto zero interest rate policy and quantitative easing was implemented. The trend of monetary easing has spread to other developed countries. As a consequence, large amounts of capital flow into emerging countries including Malaysia, and the subsequent end of monetary easing in the United States triggered capital outflows from Malaysia and the depreciation of the ringgit.
I would to explain about Malaysian monetary history in 2011 until 2020. Monetary easing and its termination in the United States and a major influence indicated Malaysia's balance of payment and exchange rate, but it was not the only affecting factor. For example, Shafiq and Arif pointed out that Malaysian unique factor include supply and demand imbalance in the domestic foreign exchange market due to maintaining a trade surplus for more than 20 years. Increased offshore not developing forward trading, increased speculation, pressure on the ringgit, but the presenting that Malaysian economy is still heavily reliant on exporting raw material actually had the opposite effect when their price fell on the international market. The depreciation of the Chinese yuan on August 2015 helped the ringgit, which was headed downward because of the deadline is close of price, reflecting the expansion of the Chinese economy and the closer economic tie between the two nations. On the internal front, the 1MDB crisis which caused that incumbent Prime Minister Najib Razak to lose popular trust contributed to the victory to Alliance of Hope Pakatan Harapan led by former Prime Minister Mahathir in the general election on May 2018. In this section, we start by reviewing macroeconomic trend in Malaysia and change the global economy since the Lehman shock, primarily by referencing change in the currency rate. The variation in the foreign capital flow and currency rate during the time period categorized below will be analyzing in the section that follow. Since the structural adjustment followed the ASEAN currency crisis, Malaysia has consistently good foreign exchange reserve supported by a constant current amount surplus from USD built in August 1998, shortly before the implementation of the fixed exchange rate to USD billion by the end of June 2011. National foreign exchange reserve expansively and quickly. By the end of 2013, the foreign exchange reserve matched approximately 8 months worth on import according to reserve accuracy metric. However, could be compromised soon if the current trend under the new government persists. That's all for me. Thank you.